believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Rika, the friends, also known as Ricky France, and a great episode for you today. Another amazing returning guest. I've been having a lot of great returning guests, and today is no different. Ryan Christian from The Last American Vagabond is with us today to talk about current events, alternative media, news, history, and a bunch of other things. If you guys have never checked out his website, The Last American Vagabond, please do. It's a great source of information, interviews, deep dives into current events, and much more. So before we get into another great conversation with Ryan, quickly let me remind you that this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of these discussions, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial, like I always remind you guys. You can rate the show, review the show, share the show, subscribe to the show on all the platforms I'm on, and that helps fight back against the algorithms that censor content creators like Ryan and myself. So if you do want to support the show, but you can't financially do so, please just take a little bit of time. That's all I ask, to rate and review. But if you can financially support the show, there's a couple ways you can do so. You can send a one-time donation via PayPal or Venmo. You can send us Ethereum or Bitcoin, and you can support us monthly on Patreon. And no donation is too little. If all you can do is support us with $1 a month, that will be more than appreciated, because if a small percentage of people who listen did that, I could do the show full time. We also have a brand new merch store with tons of new merch, stickers, mugs, tank tops, hoodies, t-shirts. And the new company I'm working with, they ship faster, it's better quality, it's just a way better store and experience. So please check out the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com to go directly to the merch store, or of course, like I always tell you, all these links will be on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com, and many of them will be in the show description. And then of course, a few sponsors. We have Content Safe, who syncs all my video channels together, and he's also my IT guy. He created my website and runs my website. So if you have any IT issues, or if syncing all your websites and channels together is something you want to do so you can save tons of time with uploading and all that stuff, please hit up Matt from Content Safe. Let him know you're a listener of the Ripple Effect Podcast, and he'll definitely hook you up and take care of you. Another sponsor is the University of Reason and the very popular autonomy courses created by Richard Grove. If you're at a crossroads in life, if you're looking to expand on some skills, learn some new skills, connect with the liberty-minded community, check out the University of Reason. Use the links in the show description or on my website. In doing so, you can help yourself and the Ripple Effect Podcast at the same time. And then, of course, my last sponsor is Element Electrolytes. If you're an athlete, if you are into just healthy living, healthy eating, and you're looking for something healthy to drink to stay hydrated and optimize your body and mind, please consider checking out Element Electrolytes. Every time you use a link in the show description or on my website, you get a free gift with every purchase. It has no artificial colors, no artificial flavors. It's keto-friendly, fasting-friendly. It's created by Rob Wolf, who is a OG in the health and nutrition community. Just look him up. He's done tons of books, documentaries, podcasts, interviews, and really one of the most respected people, in my opinion, in this community. And also, in my opinion, he created the best electrolyte product because it doesn't have any of the additional stuff you don't need. Like I said, the artificial colors and sweeteners. Only has premium ingredients, has enough of them to really help with your performance mentally and physically. And it can help with a lot of symptoms that are due to dehydration, like headaches, migraines, cramping, fatigue, and many other things. It can even help with your hangovers, because the truth is a lot of your hangover comes from dehydration when you're out drinking. So please use a link in the show description or on my website. Get a free gift with every purchase. Support the Ripple Effect Podcast and support your health by getting Element Electrolytes. That's it, guys. enjoy this amazing conversation with Ryan from The Last American Vagabond. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
How's the audio sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, good. It looks like it was already set up. Good. Perfect. How you doing, man?
Good. You?
Good, good. I just saw that my Discord got deleted.
I know. I just
Nothing new in the neighborhood, you know.
on your Twitter, and I noticed that you tweeted something about it. I never used Discord. What was it useful for? Like, what is it, like another Telegram type thing?
Well, no, I don't. It's weird. Everybody wants to associate it with Telegram. Telegram. I don't. Fucking Telegram's terrible, man. It's impossible to keep track of what's going on in Telegram. I mean, Discord's very similar, but because at least unless I'm using it wrong, you go to Telegram and the only way you can do it is kind of just to scroll back up. And there's so much content if it's a big Telegram that it's like you just get what you get while you're there in that moment. Otherwise, everything's hard to track. It seems crazy to me. Discord was kind of similar, but it's like it's kind of like a little community, like it's your own server room where everyone can chat. There's different little chat rooms within that server so they can talk about certain topics, and then you could direct message each other. But it was, it's invite only. So that's what the crazy thing to me is. It's like, what's their justification? You know what I mean? Like, it's not, we're in our own space talking about whatever. Isn't that the whole point? Like, like they're pushing every one of these other, and I don't know. It's just frustrating. I think it has to do with just whether we're getting more attention or, like there's conversations being had in there they don't like. It's become kind of like a body of work of a lot, not just T-Lab stuff. People are having like these in-depth conversations about fucking everything you could imagine. And people go back and they reference that stuff, because it's easier to kind of archive and keep track of space and stuff in Discord. So people come back and reference it. Here's that article we talked about. And, I don't think they want people doing that. But who knows? It's people have been censored on there before. But even crazier, they remove people's accounts too. Like not just the server. They actually then deleted individual accounts of like multiple people that were in my server. Think about that. It's just so vindictive. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's so weird. They didn't give you any warnings or anything like that, or were you guys talking about anything specific that you think triggered the censorship?
It's anything under the sun, man. That's what I mean. There's 40 different rooms and rooms within rooms talking about everything you could possibly imagine, from aliens to this to that, and then there's the general chat, which is kind of the only place I ever used. I'm busy. I'm never in there. I got people that manage it, but it's my shows every day posting in that main chat. So if it's anything, it's probably my content that's, challenging certain narratives and they just don't want that to be talked about. I don't know. It's just frustrating, man. I just feel bad for everybody else. That was kind of like the spot for thousands and thousands of people. That was their little home, their community, just sad.
I feel like things are going to swing back the other way, right? Because
censorship, you mean?
Yeah. I think what's going to happen is that all the censorship is going to make all these current, more popular apps and platforms kind of undesirable. And people are going to be like, okay, let's start our own one. Let's start our own app. Let's start our own platform. And obviously we saw that with the video platforms. We saw that with Rockfin and Rumble and BitChute. I know there's some questions with, those companies or other companies similar to them. But
they've had some success, though. Yeah,
they've had success. And the reason why they've had success is because if they are censoring, they're definitely not censoring as much as the other platforms. So they've become the alternative and the more desirable alternative. And, the mainstream platforms basically just give you mainstream perspectives and opinions. And I think I was talking to Mel about this recently, Mel K, about how, back in the day, even before I started podcast in 2013, when you're doing research, like YouTube was a pretty good resource. Like you go on there, you find some like, probably really poorly put together documentary, but by a really good researcher who had some really intriguing information in there. And then that researcher would bring you down a rabbit hole or bring up a name or a event or operation you weren't familiar with, and you could go research that. And it was really a good resource. And now you go on any of the mainstream platforms and it's like it's just more mainstream videos and articles and videos, and it's like, why do I want to watch a video from ABC on YouTube? I'll just watch ABC. Like I don't need YouTube. Like I'm on YouTube to get a alternative perspective and opinion, and that's typically what it was there for. And now, that's not the case now, and hopefully people realize that. I know there's a lot of, like, for lack of a better term, like normies out there who still go on YouTube to search for stuff, but hopefully they understand, like,
You can still find some stuff though. I mean, you can though. I mean, you make an interesting point there though, is that the video editing part of it, historically, a person who is an excellent researcher, an academic, as somebody who is focused on, I mean, historically, what we understand those things are supposed to be, questioning things and challenging ideas. It's very different in a lot of ways today, but a classic idea of that. And they're not usually the guys they're going to they don't know how to operate a video editing console, and so that's, you get that where you get, it's the truth. It's not, I shouldn't say the truth, but just an honest engagement with possible truth and information. And then you've got the flashy marketing, beautiful looking thing with the swirling graphics and everything's red. And the point is, it's like, just because, bottom line is, that is what became sought after. And that's marketing. And it doesn't necessarily mean the most intelligent, the most thoughtful, the most researched. So you make an excellent point, is that we've kind of gone through this turn where, of course, people now have learned, well, I kind of have to learn how to do, people like us are like, well, I'm just going to jump right over all of it. I'm going to learn how to do this myself, and I'm going to put it out there the best I can. But yeah, we're in this weird phase now where those people, like you said, you go on YouTube, by the way, the place they used to kind of ridicule as the ridiculous place that they were quietly trying to take over, right? It's just hilarious. But, now it's flooded with all the same people trying to fill you with the marketed, well-edited stuff, which is almost always more about narrative control, So, but my point, though, is that you can still find it. You go through YouTube, you'll find my stuff on YouTube still, because I'm using pirate channels, and they do delete it when they find it, but it's out there, So, but I'm with you, man. I feel like people should be running screaming from those platforms. And quite frankly, as you briefly kind of alluded to in the beginning, I think Rumble is, I don't think. I mean, let's be honest. It is exactly the same platform with a different name. It's the same. It's tied into literally every choke point that made YouTube become compromised. As Amazon Cloud Services, all the advertising, mainstream. I mean, literally every point. So I just question why it's allowed. Like, it's the same advertising group. They argue it's the advertisers going, well, we don't want to advertise with that dangerous content, but they're doing it over here on Rumble. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, there's something missing there,
I'm not sure it was mostly motivated by the advertisers. I think that was kind of what they would sell us on.
The narrative. That's what I meant more. The narrative.
I think it's more about suppressing the information from being released. It didn't have as much to do with money as it did control and power. And back in the day, like you're saying, and we're highlighting such a good point and a frustrating point, because at times I would, back in the day, send people a YouTube video, and because it was low quality, people would be like, oh, I'm not going to watch that crap. And I'm just like, dude, but the information is good. The research is accurate. I'm like, they put a lot of time and effort into gathering this information, and maybe they didn't put as much time into, gathering the nicest images and put together the sexiest video. But I'm like, who cares? Like, I could always see past the video quality. To me, like, the video, like, how
you're an honest person.
Yeah.
That's why you can't. But the problem is that.
And what are you searching for? Right?
We all
searching for entertainment, or are you searching for information? We were searching. People are searching for information, so we can, like, okay, I don't care about the video quality. Like, this information is intriguing. This is good. If you're just searching for entertainment, yeah, you might be, not, your ADD might kick in, and then you might not, keep watching, and you might miss the fact that even though it's not the sexiest video, there's a lot of really good information in there.
But if we're being honest with ourselves, we all do it to a degree. I mean, it's kind of, and this is my point about kind of the social engineering of it all, is that we have, like, okay, so right now, if you open up a new video, any of us, like, I would argue you and I, or maybe even just you more than anybody, because I can admit that I factor this in, but just based on what you were saying, that you may lean more towards, like, because you're making a point to try to look more for the information, but most people will factor in, well, you open it up, okay, first thing you see, right, is it look bad quality? Does it look like he's, is he confused when he's getting ready? He's like, are we on? Is it recording yet? Like, those kind of things, like, where people that have done this long enough, that doesn't really happen anymore, and so I'm not saying that. Then I'm like you, I will always look past that and go, okay, but let's get to the point. What's he trying to say? Where's the source material? But I'm not going to lie, those things do influence my perception of the video. It's inherent. It's something that's just, it's the way you feel about it. It makes you think, okay, well, at the very least, I mean, but you're right though. It's not fair because maybe he just started. Maybe he doesn't even care about any of those factors. But my mind would tell me like, okay, maybe that means that he's doesn't care as much. And I don't, not saying I think that, but it's kind of like the mental subconscious feeling about it. And it does, it affects it. So that's why, like, again, I've, and you and plenty of us have taken it upon ourselves to be like, okay, I'm going to learn how to do all these extra things. I'm not just going to be the reporter, the researcher. I'm going to learn how to run the broadcast. I'm going to learn these things and learn how to do it properly, learn how to make sure I know it's ready before I jump on. So I'm like, are we here? Are we ready? You know, it's like all those little small things, you know. But the problem is they've now, at the main point, they've now created a dynamic where, you know, you've got people that are flooding this same field with millions of dollars and putting 90% of their effort into just being able to say the surface level thing with lots of flashy graphics. And people fall for that. My point is we all do to a degree. So if you engineer the populace to kind of not care, it's the Twitter files game all over again. You know, people right now are being corralled into this direction because, quite frankly, we're winning the information war. And I think that scares them.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is actually maybe slightly different. I think people like you and I, we've been lied to so often, and we've uncovered so many psyops that you'll even try to look for little hints of how sincere people are. So if you can find a little piece of like, okay, does this person even care about what he's saying, or is he trying to mislead people, or is he, you know? So yeah, I think sometimes you try to find those little pieces of like, okay, when they're out of character. When I say out of character, like when they're not just trying to present information, who are they, right?
Yeah, good point.
Try to figure out, can I trust this person, you know? And that's kind of like what I try to do with this show. Is one thing I've always liked is like trying to just capture a casual conversation we would have at the pub or at the dinner table, you know, going out to eat, just hanging out, and then letting people see like, okay, these are sincere people. And when you see the human side of them, not just the Ryan that's presenting, you know, important information, realize like, okay, these are his motivations. This is who he is as a person. And then, you know, you end up building a little bit more trust for the content creator, for the researcher because of that. And I think that's important because I think sometimes, you know, you only see the side of them that's presenting information, and then, you know, you'll be like, okay, can I trust this person? Can I not? You know, are they how much effort do they put in their research? Are they trying to mislead me? Do they have other agendas? You know, do they have other motivations? So all that's really important. Now, back in the day, like when, you know, talking about YouTube again, to me, what I was referring to was more like the people who were really, like you said in the beginning, like very good researchers, but maybe didn't have the video editing skills, but wanted to get the information out there. So they would put together like a short documentary or some type of documentary that wasn't really sexy in regards to graphics and stuff like that, but had good information. And it's hard to find those things now. And at least for me, like maybe I've just given up on YouTube, where I don't really put a lot of effort in researching on YouTube. But you know, the beautiful thing about alternative media and just creative people out there, they do find ways of getting stuff up online. One thing that is, I'd love to get your opinion on this. So I was with Sam Tripoli and Eddie Bravo like a week ago, actually a week from today, and because they were doing a show here locally, close to me, like 30 minutes away over the border. I live in Massachusetts. They were in Connecticut, and I was talking to Eddie. And you know, before the show in the back, we're all hanging out, and we're talking about London Real, right? And I was kind of saying how I'm like, I'm a little skeptical of London Real sometimes too, or I'm skeptical. But he's like, oh, I know Brian, he's a great guy, and he's like, but I've heard some stuff about Brian, right? I know like Dorian Yates had some issues with him in regards to giving out like, you know, personal information or something like that. And then also, I don't know if you saw when he was running for mayor, a bunch of little kids like were interviewing him. And well, not little kids, there must have been like teenagers, and then called him out on where all that money came from during like the pandemic. He was getting all this money to run for mayor, and he was getting all this money to build a new platform. And they're like, where'd all that money go? And he was like, I don't know, he kind of beat around the bush, very you know, political type of answer. And then now, you know, and then Eddie's like, yeah, but he's like, he's uploading all Alex Jones's stuff on his channel, and you know, and I'm like, you're right. And then I'm like, but how is he getting away with that? And then I'm like, he's literally putting up everything that was typically like flagged immediately on a giant channel. I don't know how he's getting away with it. I asked Eddie how he's getting away. He's like, he doesn't know, but he's like, oh, he doesn't give a fuck. He's just doing it. And I'm like, okay, I get the not caring. I'm sold on the not caring. I'm like, I'm just not sold on how are they letting him do it? And
You want my opinion? I have a very strong opinion about this, and it doesn't matter
I love
whether.
opinions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm not saying this is the absolute truth. It's definitely my opinion, but and again, I make a very clear point about caveat. The whole thing is that I'm also not even suggesting that I know or that it's the case that people like this are aware they're being used like this. That's an important thing to point out, because I'll be the first to say there's plenty of stuff that Alex has covered over the years that is correct, but to say that the Alex Jones is right meme kind of thing is it's over. The point is there was a lot of other people doing much better work about the same things he was saying at the same times he was saying them. And as usual, we see things like this, and not everything. There's plenty of things I would point out that he was ahead of. That's clear too. But like the things like there's someone today like a Stu Peters example, or in the past, different people that I think get couched with these ideas. Even Joe Rogan is used this way. And I quite frankly have come to think that Joe is just a guy doing what he thinks. And, who knows where the influence comes from? Maybe money plays a factor. Who knows? But I've always felt that he's just, especially today, he seems to be kind of stepping further into these things. And I appreciate that. But the problem is today, the way that they've been framed is that if Alex says this, or if Joe says this, half the paradigm, and that's not even the majority of people in the country or the voting system, but half the paradigm dismisses it out of hand because you're supposed to. Oh, he said that? Oh, Joe Rogan, yeah, conspiracy theorist, whatever. The other half blindly accepts it because you're supposed to. Because this is what see what I'm saying? And so it ends up in this weird dynamic where it doesn't change anybody's minds. It just cements in what they're saying. And it's almost always on a topic that is limited truth, half truth, limited hangout, whatever we want to call it, where you're presenting something. It's to take the same old analogy I've used 1,000 times, turn the frogs gay. Well, in fact, that's actually abstractly accurate. But what the problem is that it's about endocrine disrupting chemicals leaking into the environment from corporate runoff and so on that literally change the hormonal makeup of animals other than frogs too. But when you boil it down to it's turning the frogs gay, it becomes a really simple way to dismiss something. And again, I don't know if that's on purpose or not. But so larger point, I think that what happens with this is that the hierarchy enslaving you, whatever we want to frame that as, they want this work to be seen, right? They want you to see the work there's no source material. There's no way you can look into the science and learn for yourself how to present this. You say Alex Jones show, there's the link to his website. And people dismiss that. That. People, when you hear go, look at my website, they go, oh, here we go. Right. So I don't even say this stuff anymore. I go, here's the peer reviewed science. You want to find it? I have it linked somewhere, in my work. The problem is that a lot of this is used that way. Like the reason I mentioned someone like Peters is right now he's dumping all this stuff online about direct energy weapons. And I'm the one pointing out it's not even up for debate. These things they're real. They talked about it for fucking 30 years. So I forget if we can cuss on the show. It's very real. It's documented information. There's patents. They're openly. Rumsfeld talked about it like in the 70s, like openly in a press conference, and talked about how we're going to use them. So the interesting thing is it gets framed as a fake story, but then he comes out and says they're definitely real, and then plays a video with like 47 things I can prove to you are fake. Like lens flares, rocket launches, just not, whether they're not checking or they don't care, it's kind of irrelevant to me. The problem is they look at this, they think the entire conversation is fake. They dismiss the stuff that we have found that is very concerning, even related to Maui, despite the fact that I'll still say, I don't think there's any evidence that direct energy weapons were used there or that they were even involved. But it's something we should ask about the locations and whether they were, and the problem is all that boils down to dismissing information out of hand because one person said it, because they're presenting either limited information or completely false things. So it's a long answer, but overall, I think that if it's being posted and being allowed, that there's a reason for that. Like I make it one more example on Twitter. Yacarino was meeting with the American Jewish Council Committee. I forget the name. And, bottom line is just more of these overlaps about trying to censor anti-Semitic, whatever, which means basically whatever they want it to mean, which we've all come to understand. Whether you're a Zionist, it doesn't matter. Israel bombing somebody, oh, you're an anti-Semite, And so that's already happening. And so I was pointing out that they're telling you they're going to censor this stuff. They're going to censor it anywhere, no matter what. Right underneath that post, somebody commented FK Jews. I swear, and it's still there right now. And I'm like, okay, so you're censoring people right now, under the guise that it's anti-Semitic because we're talking about the Israeli government. That's already happening. But here's a person that literally comments FK, you know what that means, Jews, right underneath the comment that you just made. It's still there right now. That could just be an oversight. My point is, I think they want people to see that because you're trying to hype the idea that that's a problem. It's a prevalent, and maybe it is. But my point is just that it's not about hiding the problem. It's about making it look worse than it is. highlighting it so we dismiss the real things that are happening, and on and on and on. So I know it gets abstract, but that's generally what I think is happening there.
Well, yeah, I definitely think that happens, right? Where they probably initially try to suppress somebody like Alex Jones, and then they're like, well, this guy is so over the top. If we let him become a household name, now we can discredit everything he says. So it's like, I think there could be possibly many different psyops, many different ways of using a researcher like Alex Jones. For a long time, there was a lot of back and forth in the alternative media community, like, is he doing more harm than good, in regards to getting this information out there. I think his research, his documentaries, a lot of people back in the day who watched 9/11 or Road to Tyranny, or even after Waco, he was quite vocal and involved, and Ruby Ridge and all these events that he kind of highlighted and would talk about, and was kind of a little bit ahead of the curve in regards to talking about this publicly. But I also think that you can only suppress truth for so long. So you can paint him as a crazy person, but I think what's happened to Alex Jones is what has happened to just about all of us, and will continue to happen. And that is, you can paint us as crazy, but if we're right, if what we're saying is true, eventually people are gonna realize that, and eventually you can only suppress it for so long. It's gonna come to the surface, and you see with a lot of the crazy things that Alex Jones, or what people would say were crazy things that Alex Jones would say. Now people are much more open to entertaining these ideas. When he was talking about, and not just him, I don't want to just talk.
Well, can I make a point really quickly about the documentary thing? I just don't want to get past it. You and I are so similar, brother. That's why I love you. We string thoughts together for 45 minutes. So feel free and cut me off too. But it's important though, and this is the problem: is I do not think Alex Jones is crazy. I think he's very smart, in fact, in a lot of different ways. He's very analytical, but the problem is just taking those exact points. And I really hope people aren't taking this as some attack on Alex Jones. Like, I don't know. It could very well be used whether he knows it or not. I want people to hear that. But the problem is that you put out this work that has some level of truth to it. But the problem is what I'm kind of saying is that at that time, people were already using him as that dismissive kind of concept, even in the community. People going, is it more bombastic than necessary? The point is, at that time, and you take any topic, and I will show you people that were people on the peripheral, not the big flamboyant person in the front of this topic, but people that were like the James Corbett's of the world, that were doing sourced work, proving these things, giving you the tools to learn this for yourself at the same time. Right? That work is actually helping people understand this stuff in a much more broad way, not using partisan bombastic points. And, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's the better stuff. And maybe I'm missing everything, and I'm, whatever. That's always possible. But I think that the work that gets buried, the stuff like James Corbett's work or others about, where you can fully understand all of the dynamics and how it relates to both sides of the false paradigm, that is what they really don't want people to see. So when you put this stuff forward, and now point back at it like the work that was really ahead of the game, I don't think so. I think the real work is the people that we weren't pointing at, the people that have been doing this for 20 years, that have been writing books about it. And this is the thing, it's like this soft release we keep seeing today. I literally, for instance, Tucker just had an interview with RFK Jr. and they break this story about the Fort Detrick biolab, and that most of us know that's a topic we all know about, but this weird momentum I'm seeing around the conversation, like, holy shit, I can't believe this. And I mean, and it's like, interesting to me, and I'm glad people hear it. But if they only go forward with the limited amount of information they got from that, like that's the whole story, and you miss the fact that it ties back to a lot more than what gets seen, then that's a problem. And look, I don't think information is bad in any sense, but if you get people that move forward as if they don't need anything else, which is how the paradigm works, you're cementing ignorance. And with limited, like, we all know the term limited hangout, limited information. Like, there's a reason this. Go ahead. I'm sure I'm doing the same thing. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just gonna.
I thought you were writing something down, so I was like, jump in. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's funny because Eddie Bravo. I was gonna write something down just because we are very similar in regards. Yeah. If you could ask me one question to start an interview, and you could leave the room, and I'll just continue talking, because
I love it though. I love it.
From subject, and then that will bring something else up, and I'll to start talking about that, and that's why I'm like you. I'm like, please interrupt me sometimes, because but yeah, well, it's funny because Eddie was talking about this, and he actually talked about this on And so when they were in town, they did stand up one show, and then they did a kind of like a live type of podcast. And I was on stage with them, and they would bring fans up, and they would like pitch their conspiracy, and we would talk about conspiracies, and it was a kind of a fun discussion with the crowd. And we were talking about this stuff, and one thing that Eddie kept saying, and I tend to agree with him, and maybe you disagree, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, but he talked about this exact issue where a lot of people will find. They'll have a problem with like, oh, okay, now Tucker's talking about this. Oh, now RFK is talking about this. Oh, now this person's talking about this. Ben Shapiro or Tim Pool or Joe Rogan or whatever. And there's all these other, like you said, great researchers. But I must say that just on the Corbett point, I remember watching Alex Jones when Corbett just started researching, and he was on that show. I mean, a lot of the researchers we love at some point, in the beginning, were on his show until they kind of started in some cases started doing better work.
There's a lot of reason to give them credit for that. I've never, like, that's why I want people to hear that there's a lot, there's things that he was ahead on. That's very clear. But that the main point still stands, I think, whether it's Corbett or before that. I blanking on people I could reference, but we know there's been researchers as far back as you want to go that have been on this. Like, God, there's a guy I keep thinking of that I can't remember his name, that people didn't even reference about Alex Jones. But go ahead, back to your point. Just, it goes before that.
Well, and if it comes to you, interrupt me. But it's so Eddie was talking about how like it's important to not get down or discourage or dismiss those guys that are dipping their toe in our team, because he's like, we need those people. Those are the people that are going to reach some other people. And like you said, like even with the Fort Detrick thing, like the idea that like there's more to the story. Yeah, some people are going to listen to that story and then it's going to stop there. They're not going to do any research. But some of those people, it's going to plant the seed of curiosity, and then they're going to go searching for more information, and then they're going to run into a podcast I might have done or you might have done on chemical weapons or whatever, and it took that one interview, that one discussion on a mainstream platform, on a mainstream type of people to finally find these alternative content creators. So I think that I tend to agree with him. I think it is important, like initially. And I remember Steve from Slow News Day and from AM Wake Up, like sometimes he I've heard him say like, oh, like they're saying it now, it's when it's easy. And I agree with him. I've even said it on this show. Like I almost upset that it's like, okay, they're getting credit for saying this stuff when it's easy to say it. We were saying this stuff when it was difficult, when we're all getting censored, and forget just being censored online. We're getting hatred online and in our personal lives because our friends and family are getting pissed that we're saying this stuff. And so we did it when it was difficult, but from the other perspective, I also don't want to act like it's a bad thing, because I think that there are some normies out there. There are some people that are going to hear it from them first, and then slowly, Rogan, I think, was a very interesting example, because if you listen to his episodes, and I would from time to time listen to his episodes, he drank the Kool-Aid. He was all on board, being afraid and the COVID lockdowns and all that stuff, and wearing a mask. And you could almost see it organically, slowly shifting. Like it's almost on air. You could see, you're witnessing the mind changing, right?
Which I appreciate.
Yeah, and so people were like, "Oh, Rogan did this," and it's like, well, yeah, it took a little bit for him to come over, but I remember talking to Eddie. I'm like, Eddie, you get a lot of credit, man, because I'm like, you had a lot of on air, uncomfortable arguments with him on the show, and it seemed like maybe it was a waste of time, or it just led to a shitty podcast because now people are going to look at you like you're crazy or whatever. But what you were doing was slowly planting the seed in Rogan's head, and you're slowly nudging him in this direction. And I know for a fact they had a lot of off-air discussions where Eddie would send him links and send him documentaries and send him articles and send him other content creators, and he slowly nudged them in this direction, now to the point where he openly had, and before he ran for president, Robert Kennedy Jr., you could say one of the most famous, most credible anti-vaxxers in the world. He had him on. This is
He's not anti-vaxxer, just to make that clear. I'm sure you know.
He's anti-unsafe vaccine, and I don't have a problem with
that's not the same. Yeah, but I think it's clear to point out that he's very outspoken that he's not anti-vax. He's very pro-vaccine. He just wants things to be tested properly. It's very different than somebody. There are very clear anti-vaxxers people out there, but that I think is even almost a justifiable position today. I'm sort of in the middle. But before we go too further, I'd like to answer your question because it'll get out of my mind in regard to Bravo. If you that's a good stopping point. So the point about what he's saying, and I do think it's important. I mean, I think this is kind of what I'm trying to say. What I said in the beginning about the kind of counterpoint is, it's not inherently bad. Look, first of all, to the point of credit, which shouldn't even be in the conversation, but first to address it. Nobody. It's frustrating that it gets regarded as some kind of a surreptitious thing. Nobody. Look, that's weird. I hate double negatives. There is nobody out there, same point though, that doesn't want credit for their work, right? It's just that everybody wants to be acknowledged for the work that they do. It's weird that gets framed as bad. I think it's kind of the way that's one of those kind of weird manipulations of like making people in independent media feel bad for wanting money for their work. It's like, those things are inherently natural, but that's not the reason we're doing this. That's the problem. People framing it as we're only about the credit. That's not what is coming up. But yes, of course, we want credit for work we do. But the main point for me is, moving credit aside, is that obviously I agree with Bravo, right? What they're doing is a positive step. You're getting a little bit more reach to the story. But all I'm saying is we at the same time need to at least ask ourselves, is that what's happening here? Right? Like, is this just an organic effort to give it some reach by people that may have only just discovered that? I'm not going to begrudge somebody for, like you're saying with Rogan, to wake up. That's what we want, right? If we're honest, we want to wake people up that didn't know any better. Just because they changed their mind, we shouldn't go, but you didn't know before, because that's happening too. And that's kind of gross. We should be open to the people that are changing their opinions, right? So that's hopeful if that's what happened. But we also have to realize psychological operations, the way that our governments work. I mean, the PSYOP division of Army just put out that creepy ass video telling you that they're fucking with everything. Remember that video with the weird clown, the ghost white mask? It's so creepy. They're telling you, yeah, we're lying to you. We're messing things up around the world. So my point is, we need to ask whether what we're looking at is in fact a release valve, right? We've talked about that too. An ability, and this is what that means, that we are on the story. You, me, independent media, people that aren't supposed to be talking about a certain thing are breaking down the story. And they're going, oh, no, people now know the vaccines are killing people. Oh, no, they now know that there are Nazis in Ukraine. Oh, no, they know East Palestine was whatever you think, that they're lying about what happened there. And so what they do is they then give you something, usually through one of these people, whether, again, they know it or not. So it can be kind of misused, but they release a very limited part of the story. You know all this limited hangout concept, right? So then you see that and think, oh, that's the story. But what really is happening is you're missing the 95% of the story that makes it. They're giving you something that before they wouldn't have wanted you to know, but it's the most unimportant part of the story. And again, it's about something that is already generally known by almost everybody. Yes, there's a biolab at Fort Detrick. That's fucking common knowledge, right? It's not a secret. But when you break it out like it's something that's new, people go, oh, it's a breaking story. And then you miss the bigger picture. The fact that Fort Detrick is on the record admitting one leak every 3 days for 7 years straight at a BSL-4 lab. The anthrax part of it, again, the part that everybody knows. It's been admitted to that anthrax came from Fort Detrick. It's been admitted to that Barry, whatever his name was a scapegoat, the guy that killed himself. These are basic knowledge things, but they're framed as something brand new. I could go on forever. The point is, read Whitney's work and the work that I've done through her, as well as in my own regard, that is very clear about the bigger picture, both sides of the paradigm, China working with the United States, the real picture there. And if that's what happened there, and again, I don't know, you'd put it out that way, you make sure people don't look further, or that you couch them in this one part of it. But you're right, some people will look further. But all I want is people to ask whether that could be happening, because if we just jump on our sides, team sport politics, we never go further, and that's part of the design.
I love the fact that you brought up the money thing, because I just talked about this on a recent podcast about how, for a while you would hear people talk about oh, this doctor, he's trying to make money off all these vitamins, and it's just I grew up in the anti-big pharma, alternative medicine, natural remedy type of world. And there were a lot of companies out there and people who were putting out information and also had their own products. But I didn't see anything wrong with that. And it's just wait, so they're anti-big pharma who's obviously trying to make a load of money and making record profits, and you're not protesting that, but you're mad that somebody who says, hey, our system, the way we look at health is all wrong. I have this information. Why not make some products that can help you and then make a profit off it or make a living doing it? Like, why is that wrong? Like, I don't see anything wrong with that. Everybody would love to take their information, their skills, their abilities, and their passions, and if they can make a living with those things, like, why not? And I know we're both on AM Wake Up Tuesday, and they were talking about that viral song, that North of Richmond song, Richmond, North of Richmond, whatever it's called. And then it was funny because my wife and I were talking about it yesterday, and then we are talking about how he was offered $8 million for the song, and he said no. And I love that, because I'm like, this shows how little corporate America understands of the real true motivations of artists. Like,
can I ask you something? I agree with you.
Go ahead.
Did you question at all whether that was true?
If he got offered $8 million?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying I have any reason to think he's lying. I love the story. I saw that. I said, if that's accurate, thank God, because I was really hoping that this guy wouldn't just get absorbed by one part of the paradigm, which is what was clearly happening. All these high right-wing people going, this is our guy. And now he's kind of seemingly giving them kind of a shun. Like, I don't want to be pulled into this. I don't want to be famous. My question is just, did everybody ask whether that was even true? Like, it's almost as if that next step, it makes me a little more suspicious that it might not be a real thing. Again, I'm not saying that. My gut tells me that it's real. It feels very genuine to me, but I don't know. I just think it's funny that we all want that to be the case. So it's one of those things where you kind of go, let's just pretend, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe he's making it up. I don't know.
They didn't give any details, I don't think, on who actually offered him the $8 million.
Right.
Or did they? At least the
I don't know.
I saw. I didn't see that. But the reason why I didn't really question it too much is because as an artist, and I'm sure you're very similar. Like, I get it. I can relate to that perspective. Like,
totally.
I'm not going to be bought. And it's funny because it's like I've had people say, like, oh, what if somebody offered you millions of dollars to go on this I'm like, I don't know, man. It would feel like work, and I wouldn't like it, and then I'd stop doing it, and I wouldn't have any money because I would stop. I would enjoy what I'm doing, or I would suck at it. I'm like,
the one thing is it's hard though, and I'd like to think I would say no. That my morals, my integrity, everything, and I've already said no to something like that once already for TLAF. Somebody tried to buy it a while back for quite a bit of money, but I don't know, when the dynamic people would argue is it worth it to sort of sell out so you could make more good happen with all this money? And it's like, my gut tells me that's never the way that actually works out. When let's sell out to Congress so we can make more good happen, and then 20 years later you're Hillary Clinton. It's like, who knows?
Yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it too. Is that okay? How long?
Hey, I'm sorry, not to imply Hillary Clinton ever wanted to do good. Just to make that clear. Go ahead.
Yeah, good point. Let's clarify. We were not saying that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is. I think there's a lot of things that morally we like to think, like, okay, if I was put in the position, would we step up and stick to our morals and what we believe in? I think COVID exposed some people in regards to that, right? Because totally. when you talk about financial, many of us could have just like, hey, how about we just kind of keep below during the COVID era, not put anything too controversial on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, so we're not blacklisted or shadow banned, because at the end of the day that's going to hurt our product. And believe me, I know people in the alternative media community that did that, like that, just people who just really kind of waited and didn't really go hard, like you and I, having Dr. Peter McCullough on, Dr. Robert Malone on, Dr. Jessica Rose, Pierre Corey, on and on and on, all these great guests that were, they, and I give them a lot of credit too, because, I just had Dr. Peter McCullough back on and Dr. Jessica Rose back on, and I've told them both, on the air and off the air, how much I appreciate their ability and their willingness to put their whole careers on the line to fight this battle, and I give them both a lot of credit. Dr. Peter McCullough, he's very well spoken. He's finding other ways of making money, which again, another one of those things where I'm sure somebody out there is like, oh, he's trying to make money off this, or I know he works with a wellness company, and it's like, dude, this guy had his license threatened. This guy, I'm like, he's like, he should be able to like make a living. This guy went on the biggest show in the world, and I don't know if you know the story. I've talked about it before, even with him on the air, about how when his Joe Rogan episode was released on that Monday, he was scheduled to come on the Union of Unwanted, and I text Sam, Charlie, and the other guys. I'm like, hey. I didn't know the show was going to be released today. There's a really good chance his inbox is going crazy. He might not see the Zoom link when I send it to him. I'm like, so just letting you guys know that I'm like, he might not end up making it for the to the Union of Unwanted tonight because they just released one of the biggest shows on the biggest platform. And he showed up. He showed up that night, and I told him on the Union of Unwanted how much I appreciate him coming on, even when he didn't need any more exposure. We weren't going to give him any more exposure than he already got from that episode being released. So the fact that it showed that he truly cared about just getting the information out there, so people like that should be able to make money and do those things. And I completely forgot my point because I just keep rambling on. And
that's good time for me to cut in on that. I forgot to mention to make a point on it last time. You meant just 30 seconds ago about the pills and the books and stuff. And it's so incredible that, like, the point you make. I mean, obviously, it's it's interesting overlap, kind of the same dynamic, is where we're in an election cycle, even though it never ends, if years before we're there. And obviously we're like, okay, Biden, criminal, Trump, criminal, like, oh, from whatever perspective. I think everybody's kind of like, even half the right now is like, Trump bad, DeSantis good, or vice versa. It's like we're all kind of like, these people are all in the game. They're all very deceitful. And then RFK steps in. And it's almost like palpable how he is just not the same thing. Like, again, I'm very critical of his stance on Israel and a lot of other things that I'm frankly kind of suspicious about and curious and skeptical. But at the same time, I can also be honest enough to acknowledge that he is like light years ahead of all these other candidates and almost everything else he's talking about, especially medical freedom. So my point is that when we then go, let's be very critical about what he says here, because it's almost like we're more focused on exposing the one we all think is honest, as opposed to hyper focusing on the ones we already know are dishonest. You see what I'm saying? Like, so it's like we end up focusing on the honest person. So people frame it like, why are you attacking the one guy that's honest? So it's kind of the same thing, is where you get this field where big pharma is just clearly profiteering, flooding with all this garbage, and all the media are out there hyping for it. And we all seem to know that. So then somebody like us comes out and we're like, truth, but here, buy this vitamin D. Like, shill. And it's just like, okay, like your point. Like, so you seem to not care about this, but it's not that they don't care. Obviously, we all care about this problem over here. I think it's that people get so on guard, and rightly so, about other grifters fronting as something that's honest. And I totally get that, because that's almost more evil, quite frankly, to pretend to be good while doing even worse. But all that being said, it's ridiculous that we would argue that they shouldn't be, let alone vitamins, first of all. Like someone like Dr. Mercola, who I use some of his vitamins. The guy sells vitamin D and vitamin C. It's like, you're going to call someone a grifter for selling vitamins? This is pretty ridiculous. But we should begrudge them for trying to make a profit, which, whether you think it's honest or not, while they're, at least we would argue that we think they're trying to do something good with that. We should question everybody. I just think that's crazy. Or the books, for example. Like, someone's going to come out there and be like, here's what I'm doing, here's my work, and then, but I have a book for sale. And that somehow discredits everything they said. It's like, what is wrong with people? Don't you have a right to try to, market yourself and sell? I mean, it's weird that we frame, like we said before, that's framed as bad when it's done by good people. When it's done by bad people, it's just part of the game. It's like, it's just such a strange dynamic. I frankly think it kind of stems from something dishonest, and we get the same thing with the money stuff, like donations,
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, the thing is, like, Element Electrolytes, Rob Wolf, who, if you haven't read Sacred Cow or watched the documentary, great documentary. He's always a great guest on Rogan's. He's been a guest on this show a bunch, and then he asked to be a sponsor. I'm like, I already use your product. I talk about your product. It's a great product. No artificial colors or flavors or anything. It's just electrolytes, sweetened with stevia or whatever. So, but his story, right? So, and now it's become one of the biggest, like, up and coming electrolyte companies. And but how it all came about, right, is that he worked with athletes. He's a paleo guy, opened one of the first CrossFit gyms. He's very outspoken in regards to, like, even controversial stuff like climate change and stuff like that. He's very outspoken with, like, the food agenda. That's what Sacred Cow kind of hits on a little bit. And these things aren't good for business. And he because obviously, being politically neutral when you own a business is the best way of running a business, some would say. And so this guy had a product where he's like, hey, a lot of people are having cramping issues or whatever, who are doing keto or carnivore or fasting. So he created he put out a formula, right? That he's like, this is what you should do. This is the formula. Like, add this much sodium, this much potassium. No, no, this is how you make it. And people were making it on their own, right? And then eventually, he's like, people are like, dude, why don't you just come out with a product? And then he's like, you're right. You know, it would just be easier if I give people the thing that I'm recommending them to take. If you're an athlete or a gym rat and you're exercising to optimize your body and mind, if I just put it in a product. And that's where it stemmed from. It stemmed from like, hey, I'm recommending this. And then people are like, hey, how about you just put it like, so it's like writing a book, right? It's like, oh, this guy has all this research. And it's like, okay, wouldn't it be easier if I just put all this research into a book that people can buy, right? Or I have all this information about like which vitamins are good for you and which version of those vitamins and which places to get those vitamins from and the high quality vitamins compared to low quality vitamins. He's like, I can referencing these other companies, or you know what, I'll just give it, I'll make one and I'll give it to you, and then you know you can trust it. So it's like, to me, it's a simple next step, right? If you're
but move all that even away though. The point, and I agree with you 100%. Like that's it, but people would rightly so should be able to question whether that's even what happened. Well, who knows, right? But it doesn't even matter though. The point is, you believe in it, you took it, you like it, it's something you actually believe in and are willing to endorse. Now, again, the point is that people can question that too. Like, of course, you know, I guarantee there are a lot of big influences out there that go, this new thing I love and I've always used. And it's like, probably not. That's probably what they wrote for them to say, right? But the point is that at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that there's no reason you should begrudge somebody for trying to make a career. Like, you can't make this work without being able to fund your work. It's just so it's a funny dynamic. So it's if you trust Ricky, if you think that he's doing what you think is right, then you could support him through that or something else. There's nothing dishonest about that, And then the point is, I would agree that you're somebody who I know well enough to know that you wouldn't sell it if you didn't think it was a good product. I mean, it's even something that I was entertaining, and maybe still if it pops up, because of the way the world is right now. Everybody's being squeezed. People's electric bills are 3-4 times what they were before. People don't have any money. So I was like, is there advertisers out there? Because I've never done that before. Even still, entirely donation-based model. That's all I've done. But I was like, well, if we want to grow, if we want to even maintain what we're currently doing, I got to start thinking about different things. And so I reached out, and I even got responses, which is crazy, which probably you get from. I don't need to mention anybody's names, but they're good people, good groups that I know, that I appreciate, that I would believe in. And they were like, we love your work. We believe in you. And we would love it. The point is, and Discord proves that today, that it's not a safe bet for us. Like, if we put money into this, you could be deleted tomorrow, and I'm like, you know what? I get that. Thank you for being honest with me, and it's like, so, so ultimately I'm left trying to find advertisers that want to advertise more so because they believe in my work, which is a fucking unicorn. It's like, it's just so crazy. And so now I'm back to trying to do more donation based, but it's funny the way people try to make it out to be dishonest when, it's just, we're trying to fund our work to help people at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I was always worried about that perception. For the longest time, I resisted, and I honestly, I also didn't want it to feel like work. And then so Element Electrolytes end up opening the door because I'm a huge fan of Rob Wolf. A lot of my information, I mean, some of my most influential documentaries I watched back in the day and books back in the day were all by Rob Wolf. So I really highly respect the guy, and he, I'm like, I already use the product. I already talk about, because I mean, obviously, organically, if you're having a casual conversation, I like to, if I can, I'll bring up stuff that I use and suggestions for people and recommend products and stuff. So I'm like, I'm already talking about it. So I'm kind of already, doing a little commercial or advertising it. I'm like, the only difference is that I'm going to get free stuff and I'm going to be able to get a link for people where they can support the show. So I'm like, why not? And then that opened a door where I'm like, okay, well, I'm not open to sponsors, but if it's people I like and people I know. So my only sponsors end up being Richard Grove, University of Reason. Richard and I have been friends forever. And obviously, I support just about all his work. He does amazing work. And then Content Safe, who Matt has saved my life in regards to, uploading time. I get to spend more time with the family because I'm not spending all this time uploading videos on every single platform I'm on. And so those are it's people that I know, people I like. So I'm open to that. I mean, Sam, he does a lot of advertising. He, when we're together, a week from today, a week ago. He brought this up. He's like, Rick, he's like, I know you keep saying you don't like sponsors, but he's like, you should really think about it. He's like, because he knows that like the end game for me is like I would love to do this for a living, but I don't. There's like certain things I won't do to get there. Right? I want to try to
because you have integrity.
yeah, and it's just it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, if I do a couple sponsors, companies I like, University of Reason, Content Safe, Element Electrolytes, I'm like, those are things I like. Those are people that I believe in, people that have been on the show before they even became sponsors, and people that I was friends with. But I'm not willing to just be like, okay, well, who's the highest bidder? Let me just put their commercial on the show. Sam was talking about how like he actually, and I don't know what service he uses or what, but he's like, you can actually go back to old shows and you can put advertisements. Like there's a way of doing that. And I'm just like, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm like, I've always been just a little, but a lot of it is like the reasons you're talking about. It's like the fear of people thinking like, okay, have you sold out or have you, and maybe there is a way of doing it where, you can, it doesn't have it has zero effect on your work. And to me, like even looking at like sometimes I'll have guests that want to come on, they're like, oh, I'm just curious, like how many, what's the male to female ratio, well, what's the age group that, and I'm like, I don't know, I barely look at those statistics because honestly I'm afraid that it'll end up influencing what I'm doing, and I don't want any outside influences. I'm like, I just want to put out stuff that I enjoy, stuff that I like, stuff that I think is
all marketing.
It is.
I swear to God, I feel I hear marketing, I feel like it's a dirty word. This is it's hard for people in our field. Like when I was what's that?
Said that right? Bill Hicks is like, is it marketing or yeah? He's like, he's like, if you're a marketer, kill yourself. That was
yeah. Right. Is that what he said? I love that. I didn't know that. That's hilarious. Well, the point is that ultimately it's about manipulation. At its core, let's be honest about it. You're trying to. It's like when you go on a first date, and everybody knows this. And you're not really presenting who you are. You're presenting who you want people to see you as. The best example of yourself, which is almost never what you really are when you're laying around on a Sunday morning. And it's like that's not who you really are. And we all kind of know that we're putting that front on. That's what marketing is. You're trying to dress this up in a way that is not necessarily entirely dishonest, but is. You're trying to, how do I get them to want to do this? Not just based on merit, not build that they will come, but it's the other way around. And I just can't stand it. And there's ways to do it that are not wrong, right? There are ways to kind of just, find a way to get your name out there. That's not like in kind of some manipulative way, but at the core of most marketing techniques is pretty damn slimy. And I've bumped up against that with Super U and different groups I've worked with where I'm just like, it feels wrong. And I tell people, I'm like, I disagree with this entirely, and it's just, and it's like, that's where the idea of scraping data comes from, right? Well, if we scrape all their data, we can find out, like you said, who's viewing when and from where and how old they are. And I'm just going like, what does that matter? So now you're arguing we're going to slant the platform to meet what we think they want, as opposed to building what's the best. Like, that's gross to me. And they're like, it's like blank stares. And it's like, what do you, it just blows me away, So I'm with you. I really, really don't like that. And I think that I do the same thing. I even tell my audience, I'm like, look, I'll listen to you guys. You tell me what you think, what's going on. Like, I hear you, but I'm not going to then slant my coverage based on what you want me to be covering. I'm going to cover what I think is most important. And quite frankly, I think that's why people watch our shows. Because it's not the new hot topic of the day framed just the way you like it. It's what we think is happening. And usually it's critical and it's uncomfortable and it's ahead of the story. And that's why it gets censored. And that's why people get frustrated and call it conspiracy theory. And then 6 months later, it gets breaking news. It's what keeps happening. That's why I think. But I think that's important. I think people like you in this field are keeping people. It shows people that there is honesty out there. And I think that's very important today.
Well, I love the fact I'm not the only one who thinks marketing is sleazy because the thing is, like, so one of my issues I have with London Real is like they would put out videos, like clips of them or small portions of them, and then they would say, come to our website to watch everything. By the way, you just have to put in your email address, and they're using that. Who knows what they're using that email address for,
right.
or whatever, or they even
sell them.
Yeah,
that's what you're saying, right? People know, so people hear that. They sell they sell bulk emails like that, and people spend a lot of money for that.
And London Real does it. I
don't know if they're selling them, just to make that clear for people listening. But go ahead.
I'm saying they make you at least put in your email address.
Yeah.
But what other reason? So even if they do put in your email address, like even if they don't sell it, the part that kind of rubs me the wrong way is like I'm constantly getting emails from you now saying like fund this or do this or pay for this conference or whatever, and it's like, Patrick Bet-David does very similar things. I think he's like slowly, because he is like one of those hustler businessmen. Same thing with Brian Rose, and I've never really liked those type of guys. I always feel like you seem like a car salesman. I'll tell you the story about Patrick Bet-David. I don't know if I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but because I saw him. I would see from time to time you would have some interesting guests on. I'm like, oh, he might be an interesting person to have on the show. I was really close to getting him on, and then somebody from his team, he had a new book that he was going to come on to talk about, and then somebody from his team said, hey, he's really busy, whatever, but if you buy, I don't know what the number was, it was at least 100 copies of his book, he'll come on. And I'm just like, I read the email and I'm like, is this for real? Like, is he really trying to get me to buy 100 copies of his book? I'm like, I'm literally paying him to come on.
That's what it is.
And basically, and I'm helping his book sales, even though I'm probably not going to read, I'm not going to read any of it, but but
there are huge influencers that do that all over the place that will sell their appearances on interviews. That's disgusting. That is cheap and petty, and it's not real journalism. It's not real that look, but again, let me put it this way though. We could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe we're missing the boat, and maybe the whole point is you got to market yourself just right to get the truth out there just as much. And I'm sure that's the way they'd like to frame that. But I'm with you, man. That's creepy. I mean, that is really in the wrong direction. But that's my opinion, and I know I would argue that we are far over. Like we're not balanced in the sense. Like I'm way over here. Like all of that's gross and bad, and I do understand that that's not entirely accurate. Like there's a level of this that I would argue isn't dishonest. But to me, it's all dishonest. And I just have to rationalize that I know I'm kind of wrong about that. But that's not okay. I'm glad you told me that.
It gave me and I want, okay, so let me just highlight the fact that I don't know if this came directly from him or if this was a way of somebody's team to try to sell more books or whatever. But so I can't say obviously it came right from him, but it definitely came from his team. And but I wasn't surprised because I'm like, you look at like, his show London Real, like very similar shows to those shows. Like they market anything, they push everything, events like VIP, get this and if you look at, I've talked about this actually recently with Dr. Jessica Rose because it came to mind because it was she's Canadian and it's one of my favorite Canadian documentaries. Back in the day I had somebody on from the
I love her, by the way, just want to say that she's fantastic.
And surfers, I think there's something about
totally.
Dr. Carrie Mullis and Jessica Rose, they're very, I don't know, they're just really cool people. But so the corporation, I don't know if you ever watched it. It was one of the highest, I guess, watched or sold documentaries of its time. It's a little bit older, but they did like, I don't know, it was like 15 years of research on corporations and all the techniques that go into selling you products. And I would recommend this documentary over and over to people because I'm like, it's all manipulation. It's like this idea that like, so the typical capitalist is like, oh no, we're just giving you what you want sometimes. And then sometimes you're convincing me that's what I want, Right. When you look at like the history of, so even speaking of Richard Grove, one of my other favorite documentaries is State of Mind, The Psychology of Control. And it goes into how you can, social engineering, how you can sway people subconsciously without them even knowing it. The corporation hit on that also. And so the thing is like a lot of the time it's, you don't even realize.
I just remembered what it was. Go ahead.
Oh,
sorry, I didn't need to say that.
No, I was just gonna say a lot of the time, like you're not even sure what's swaying you in one direction or another. They're indirectly doing it. And Edward Bernays, which we've all talked about a lot, the Godfather of propaganda. What people don't realize is that if you go to the university for PR or marketing, you learn his techniques because propaganda and marketing are the same techniques. It's just labeled something differently, but it's the exact same thing.
I just said I'm glad you said that. Sorry, I didn't mean to. The point was I was trying to remember what the corporation was. I knew it, and the whole time you were talking about, I'm like, what is it? What? And then I finally remembered. It's got a really important part that I use on my show all the time when it gets into the bio patenting, that part of it. You know what I'm talking about? Where they get into where they started patenting human life, and it's terrifying, that part of the whole thing. It's really, really creepy. And when was that made? That's old, right? It was
yeah. Well, I mean,
was it 90s or 2000? I forget. Looks pretty old. I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it had to be early 2000s. I mean,
early 2000.
I think so, because I started my podcast in 2013, and I know it was out way before that, because that was one of the documentaries that really, inspired me and really, did one of the best jobs highlighting just how much manipulation goes into marketing. And that's the thing, like, people don't realize, like, they're not, when so you look at, like, GM, for example, they sell Cadillacs, they sell pickup trucks, same company, it's made by GM, but completely different marketing methods, right? A Cadillac commercial, they have a guy in a nice suit, luxury watch. It looks like he's a CEO of a company, lives in a nice house, and so and then the pickup truck commercial, guy with like a southern accent, deep voice, very country sounding, very rugged sounding. What are they selling you? They're not selling you the product itself. Right. They're selling you the image, the feeling that the product will give you, and that's what people are buying. So when I buy a Cadillac, people are going to think I'm that guy. I'm that CEO. When I buy that pickup truck, it represents who I am. It represents me being rugged and a country guy or whatever. Where, like, back in the day, they used to market things like, okay, this car has good brakes, or this much horsepower, whatever. Now it's like, it's not what's emphasized isn't so much the product itself, it's the feeling the product will give you. It's right. So indirectly, and this all goes to Edward Bernays.
CDC does. Here's an interesting overlap. The government, big pharma, it's exactly the same thing. And this is one of the reasons that I think so many smart people were lost during all this, is that they have already been convinced because of propaganda or marketing. I'm glad you make that overlap. They're the same thing, because they convinced people who are smart, which doesn't necessarily mean critical thinkers, just that they are, let's put it this way, educated. They've gone to college, they have degrees, that they have convinced themselves that they're smart because they went through classical education. Therefore, I'm supposed to listen to what we are told are smart people. That I've seen it with people in my life that I know are, I just put it this way, and not to even put his name out there, but this person graduated from college when they were like 17 years old, like skipped numerous grades, very, very, very smart. And the point is, this person has been one of the most difficult people in my life to convince with peer-reviewed science that they're wrong about everything. Everybody else, my mother, my brother, everyone in my orbit is like, have come around to see the truth, and they're borderline still wearing masks. And you're like, okay. And so I've come to understand through conversation that it's because, well, the CDC says that these are what you're supposed to do, and not saying it, but when you suss it out, that it's because that's what smart people do. I'm not going to listen to that debunked doctor. I'm told the smart people look at what the CDC says or what the corporate media tells me I'm supposed to think. And it's amazing to me that that's so completely on the opposite spectrum of critical thinking, of actual intelligence, to be able to discern the truth, or that someone's trying to deceive you, as opposed to being a follower. But you're highly educated. Sam, it's a fascinating dynamic. And I think it all goes back to marketing, that they've been convinced at that level that that's what they're supposed to do. And it's like, it's almost cult-like, like religion almost. And that's what all this comes down to. I mean, it's a really great analogy about the idea that these people are like, oh, well, you almost can picture the image of that picture of the southern accent and the framing, and you can see the farm behind them. And, and they're thinking like, oh, okay, so this is what I'm supposed to be. I don't want that cattle. I want, it's so sad that people fall for that stuff. And it gets bigger, by the way, than just buying cars. I think we can get into that if you'd like, but it's more about a lot of bigger things. But anyway, that's a fascinating point. I hope people hear that, because so much goes into marketing today.
Yeah, and like I said, there's people who go to college for marketing and PR, know Edward Bernays as a godfather of marketing, and they don't realize. A friend of mine was marrying his girlfriend. They're getting married, and we're hanging out and talking, and she goes to school for PR. I don't know if it was public relations or marketing or whatever. And I'm like, hey, you guys ever bring up Edward Bernays? She's like, yeah, he kind of created our field. And I'm like, he also wrote the book Propaganda. She looked at me, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, look into who he really was, and what he used his techniques for. But the thing that I noticed, right, when you talked about how there's certain people who will just listen to whatever they're told and whatever the authorities tell you to do, and those are the experts, that's what they listen to. And I think one of the problems is that, so they created a system where, like, okay, if you listen to what we say, if you study when we tell you to study, If you regurgitate the information we tell you to regurgitate, if you accept these truths and these things of being facts that we tell you to are facts, you go to college, you get a high-paying job. Never mind, you're in debt and you're a slave to that debt. But you get a no, you'll get a better job. You get the
Hey,
white picket fence, and you do all these things. So what happens is that like they basically convince you like be a part of the system and everything will work out. And what ends up happening is like the only way you could get into that university is that you buy into this idea that like they are right, I should listen to them, they're the authority. And so I think a lot of these people who have like PhDs, like a lot of people think like, oh, they must be really smart, they must be good critical thinkers or have good problem solving skills. I'm like, no, they just bought into this system. There's this game. The game is like you go to school, you do good in you never ask questions, right? You never push back, you just do what the teacher tells you. That so the teacher likes you get good grades, and then you end up going to university. Teacher likes you, professor likes you get good grades, you get this job, and then there you go, and you're just a piece, a part of the system. And
machine,
yeah, and so you never establish like, okay, let me ask questions, let me push back, let me second guess the information they're giving me, because those
or taking a step further, medical school, same thing, even actually worse than all of the rest of it behind. That's very telling. You hear that from doctors. It's you're not even allowed to ask questions in many of these classes. That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's almost like there's these rules, you follow the rules. There's this game, you play this game, you follow the rules, and then everybody assumes because you're really good at this one game, you must be smart or intelligent. It's almost like meeting a professional when you see interviews with professional athletes, and you're like, how is this guy so smart on the field or on the court, but he sounds like an idiot? And it's like, and you're like, oh, okay, his intelligence is limited to that one game. It's limited to that. Like he's spent his whole life understanding this game and following those rules, and then everything else, it's just like it's another universe. It's just completely out of his realm of understanding. So it's just like, to me, I feel like that wall of thinking like, okay, this person's on this pedestal and they're incredibly intelligent because they have a PhD or whatever, like that's kind of decaying. I think people are kind of seeing through that. Like I don't know how far you went in school. I barely graduated high school. I came to America as a Portuguese immigrant. I was always behind, and the school system's like, put them in special ed, and I'm like, I just trying to learn the language. I'm like, I'm not an idiot, I'm just trying to learn the language. And then I just never, I was always behind, because I'll be honest, a lot of those special ed teachers probably were in special ed. They were equally as behind as I was, and I'm just like, oh my god, we have the blind leading the blind. So, and then we once I got into high school, they're like, oh, you're not a book smart kid, because I never had the best grades, because again, I just came to the country, was always a little bit behind, never really caught up. And then they end up putting me in a vocational school. And then this whole time I'm like, yeah, the school system tells me I don't like history or science or information or any of these things. And now I do a podcast where all I do is talk to scientists and doctors and nutritionists and researchers and historians. And I'm like, wow, I'm like, they were wrong,
Of course they were. It's because the entire system is not designed to encourage free thinking or to encourage just dissection of thought or anything. Like you're not supposed to stand back and critically analyze these things. You're not supposed to say, are there alternative thoughts on this? That, it's the same. This is important. And I've learned this from James Corbett a long time ago, is that the entire system it's based on a Prussian with a P school system that is literally designed to make obedient workers. This is historically accurate. You can look this up. And now that doesn't mean that there aren't deviations in different types of school, but the point is our entire history of our schooling outlook is about creating people that follow. We can all see that. I mean, that's patently clear. But you're like you said, I do think it's beginning to shift. People are beginning to see through all of this. But the problem is that now we're in this divide where you've got anybody that challenges classically held thought is the conspiracy theorist, white supremacist, whatever pejorative they're using that day. And then everybody else are the ones you're supposed to, the 99.9% of scientists agree. It's like, no, that's not even remotely accurate. It's just that you're kicking anybody out of the club that doesn't say what you like. And it's becoming very defined. I think a lot of these things are burning down right now. And that's why we're seeing so much aggression. And, I think like I said this to start, I genuinely believe that we're winning the information war, whatever you think that means. I've said this 100 times, but people think about it. Take a step back. Look at the way that this dynamic was working 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It gets more pronounced the further you go back. That they barely didn't mention what we were doing before. They occasionally laughed or chuckled about the dumb people and the YouTubers, the conspiracy theorists. Today, we're literally setting the narrative. Half their coverage is about trying to debunk what we're saying, or the crazy things happening in the Maui story. Like, they're being forced to constantly engage, and that shows you that these things are shifting. And that doesn't mean everybody doing that is being honest. There's a lot of manipulators we've sort of already mentioned to some degree, and I think that the problem is they're just trying to bury that under the idea that everybody in this category is false. That shows desperation, So I'm glad to see that these things are kind of opening up and people are asking these questions. Go beyond the schooling system. Look at the medical system. Realize that it's based on triage. We're literally going, let's get you just good enough to get back out there in the war, or whatever we're calling that today. That's you too, people listening. That's why it's the third leading cause of death in this country. How the fuck we make sense of that? Oh, there's that many people. No, that's a ridiculous lie. It's because it's hurting people. COVID opened that door, I think, for people. Anyway, it's important.
Yeah, that's insane. And so I don't want to take up too much of your time. Plus, my wife going to work soon. The restaurant business. Oh, never.
I love and respect it, man. I love and respect it.
But let people know where the best spots to get your work, any upcoming projects, and also any news stories, because you put out so much content. Like, any news stories you think that you're really proud of that they should go take a look at first, and any upcoming stories you might be working on.
Well, I want upcoming for sure. Taylor's been working on for a couple months now. A really important interview. It's the last interview Arne Burkhart did before he passed away, and it's high. It's 4K multi-camera. I mean, it's this huge endeavor, and it's taken a long time. People are kind of like, "What's going on with that?" And it's about to come out. And the point is that there's a lot of dynamics involved where, so he passed away, right? And there's a whole story there that we're trying, that's still fleshing out. I'm frankly very suspicious about it, but I don't want to jump the gun. But what happened was there's all these things that they needed to follow up on. So now she has to go around while this is going on, trying to find people that were associates of his and be like, I need this to be confirmed. I need to find this document because we care about source material in Last American Vagabond, right? That's a paramount. So most people will just dump this interview out there, right? But we are confirming things. We're making sure that if we say it, the source material is included. So yeah, I know you have to go. The point is, it's important. It's being done. It's definitely coming out very soon. It's going to be a huge, important interview. A lot of other work. Go to thelastamericanvagabond.com. Derek just put out a great article about the digital ID push for the driver's licenses, which is coming out, which, by the way, Twitter is rolling out that same thing right now. Make sure people see the connection there. It's all part of the same thing. And then just, even on the show and everything else, we've been just knocking down, keeping an eye on these bigger stories, both, whether it's Maui or East Palestine or Ukraine, the Azov movement and everything else. So, and the COVID narrative seems to be coming back. So, pay attention, guys. Question everything. Thanks for having me on, Ricky. I always love our conversations. Like I've said before, it's just, it's fun. We cut to it's real. That's which I appreciate with your show. So thanks, brother.
Yeah, and we're very similar. Which sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself. I'm like, oh, this is what talking to myself would be like.
Right.
It's funny because the first time I ran into your show, I'm like, oh, he does it too. Like where you go from one idea to another, and I'm like, it's not that I don't want to give somebody opportunity to talk, but it's like your brain just has so many things going on at once, and I see it when you're talking, like you just go from like you're talking about this one example, then it reminds you of this other story, and you're talking about that, and I'm just like,
people get mad at me. They say, because sometimes I don't finish sentences. Like I look back and I'm like, how the fuck I didn't even finish what I was saying, because your mind is so jumping from thing to thing, and then you like leave a half point in there, and it's what I think what people like about it. I'm told that's a sign of intelligence. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. That the idea that there's 1,000 running thoughts in your mind, I'd like to believe that's the case. Maybe we're just crazy. I don't know.
Yeah, funny because that's one of the one of the few complaints I get is always like, dude, you didn't finish your point, and it's like sometimes like before I finish my point, I'm already on to the next point, and
Right.
I didn't even finish explaining my first. So it's like, yeah, it's very simple. It's hard because it's like we're I think we're the type of people that it's like, okay, we have limited time on this earth. We're trying to
Totally.
consume as much information and understand things as best as we can, which means like intaking a lot of information, and then you have all these thoughts about that information and opinions on that, and it's like it's really hard to like verbalize it all, but and sometimes in our head it's like, okay, it's simple, and then you put it out and you're trying to explain it in the way that you understand it in your head, and it's hard to verbalize it the same way you understand it. So yeah, but it's fun because I'm glad I'm not the only one who's like this. Well,
Well, it's a pleasure,
thanks,
brother.
Christian.
Thank you.
Hey, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Don't work too hard. And I'm glad that even with all the censorship, you're still running the website and still finding a way to make a living doing this, which I love, and it gives the rest of us a lot of hope. And keep up the great work. And hopefully we talk again in the near future. I'll keep you updated on the next Union of the Unwanted. I know typically they're a little later than you like to talk for, but
No, I'll try to be there. I love what you're doing over there too. I got to make it back there again. So let me know for sure.
yeah, I'll let you know, and we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Sounds good, brother. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Hey, enjoy your weekend.
Thanks.